Hi, everyone. My name is Peter Lowe, and this is the Pivots and Paydays podcast. It's not my podcast, it is Hawa's. And I think it's probably best if Hawa explains, gives a little introduction.
Yeah, no, I mean, thank you so much for joining me on the Pivots and Paydays podcast.
Pleasure.
I am not used to being the one sat on the hot seat, but I am today because Peter thought it would be a good idea to tell my story. So over to you, Peter.
I do, absolutely. So Hawa was kind enough to invite me onto her podcast series. And we had a little chat earlier, and about like my background and stuff like this. And I thought that it would be a very good idea if, given Hawa's recent history, if she were to be interviewed as the first episode, and she agreed. So here we are. Hawa, first of all, tell us, what do you do?
Oh, great question.
I mean, I have to say, by the way, Howard gave me some inspiration for the question. So you've only got yourself to blame. But yeah.
I really do. I really do. Yeah. It's a good question. It's a question that, for me, always induces a bit of a deep sigh because I wear multiple hats. But I think the best way to describe what I do is probably to say that I have a background in technical product management,
Right.
and most relevantly for this conversation, I most recently pivoted into cybersecurity, which was the genesis and idea of wanting to create a platform like this where people come and tell their pivot stories. So I currently work in cybersecurity.
So just to give a little bit of background, how different are these two areas? Because they're both in tech, right?
Mhm.
So, what is technical product management for anybody who doesn't know?
Yeah, good question. So technical product management is a bit of a strange role in that I don't think any two people would describe it in the same way. And I don't think it's done the same way anywhere you go. But I'll give you my interpretation of what technical product management is,
Yeah.
in the sense that I did it. So you are basically the person that owns a part of the product, and you lead your product team in that area. So you're usually working with the wider business to translate requirements, understand what needs doing, understand how to progress whatever part of the product you're working on, and understand where those levers are that you and your engineer and your UX designer can work together, what you can do, what you can build,
Right.
how you can impact customers, and then you build out those features, build out a roadmap, and all of that good stuff. It's kind of an all-encompassing role. I found my way into it first as a founder who was building her own technical products, and then I realized that role that I was doing as a founder could be done in a wider organization, and I wanted to go and do that on a team of product managers because I hadn't done it before, and I wanted to kind of be immersed by people that had more experience, and be somewhere I could learn. But that's kind of how I would
Yeah.
describe it. It's all encompassing.
I've worked with TPMs before. I think that's actually a pretty good description. So, but it sounds like you've done a couple of pivots then. So I want to come back and to this in a minute and ask about the similarities and differences between your different
Yeah.
roles. But before we do that, I think people would appreciate hearing a little bit about your background, other than your experience as a founder. How did you get into that? And
Yeah. In one word, selfishly.
oh, really?
Yeah, I'll give you the story, the background of that. So I'll take it way back. I did not start off in tech. I did a psychology degree.
Okay.
And actually before that, I had written a children's book.
Should I be
So
should I be nervous about my interview coming up then?
100%, Peter, 100%. No, before I actually went off to uni to study psychology, I wrote a children's book, and that was,
A children's book. You studied psychology, wrote a children's book.
yep.
Okay, go on.
Yeah. It's been a few pivots. It's been a few pivots. The whole platform's starting to make sense now, isn't
Yeah.
it? So I wrote a children's book. I then went off to study psychology. And then while I was there, I kind of stumbled across a problem that I wanted to solve, a really personal and selfish problem, which was that I wanted to learn videography, and I was really interested in cameras, lenses, consumer technology as a whole.
Right.
And as a broke uni student graduating, I had no money to buy all of the tech that I wanted to, in terms of, camera lenses are thousands and thousands of pounds. And I did not have the money to spend on purchasing all of the tech that I wanted to play with. So I ended up um, thinking about this concept of how can I tap into the sharing economy to leverage other people who already own this tech and build a bit of a community around people that wanted to just use the tech, hobbyists like myself. And then I started to realize that other people were having a similar issue. And I thought, okay, well, someone should probably do something about that. And that's kind of how the idea started for me. When I say it was like it developed from the really cliche doodle on a notebook. And then I started talking to people, and it massively snowballed into me building this tech platform and then getting some funding from Innovate UK to
Nice.
keep growing it and growing that community. And it was quite well timed because by the time COVID happened, it meant that we were actually in quite a good position to support a lot of students and a lot of creatives who then couldn't get access to the tech that they needed to. So we would supply tech for a lot of people during that time.
That's amazing. And then how did you transition into technical product management for that? You took your skills from that and applied it on a wider scale.
Yeah, so once I had been doing that for a while, again, I was kind of winging it, like a lot of founders that come into the technical space and are then building in the a technical product in that in
Yeah.
that realm. I was winging it and figuring out a lot of things as I go and failing fast and getting back up and doing it again, um, and just testing things. And I actually didn't know at that time that product management was a role that even existed because, again, psychology was my background, and humanities. So I just had never kind of ventured into that space before. And once I started building my tech platform, that's kind of when I started having conversations, whether that was with engineers or, other people that were product managers that then told me that what I was doing
Yeah.
to build my product was technical product management.
Right.
And I thought, oh, okay, I know a name for this now. I can now look for that mentorship and expertise, and I can actually go and do a few courses to sharpen up my skills to build my product that I was working on. And I came across a role for a company that I really loved. I was already using their product, and I thought, okay, let me shoot my shot. Let me see what
Was
happens
it,
if I apply.
was that the moment that you decided to? Was it like an accidental thing? You just came across it, or
Yeah,
did you start going out? And do you think, okay, I want to go into product management and or
yeah.
technical product management?
I A bit of both,
Yeah.
50-50. It was a little bit of, I knew that I wanted to be on a product team because I wanted to have more senior product managers around me that I could ask questions. Because the way I was doing it, I couldn't really ask anyone any questions.
Yeah.
It was me and Google, Peter. We were best friends at this
No
point.
chat GPT at the time.
But yeah, no chat GPT at the time, unfortunately. So I wanted to be in a community of people that I could ask questions to, and I knew that I wouldn't find that if I was just working away on my own on building this product. So I knew that I wanted to have that team. So when I saw the role, it was already an idea that was kind of peripherally in my brain. And when it came about, it kind of felt like one of those moments, those light bulb moments.
Okay, that's cool. It sounds like the aspect of being a founder that you really enjoyed is what you decided to kind of go on and pursue, and then something sort of, I don't know, fell into your lap, or you came across something, but serendipity.
Serendipity, that's a good word for it, to be fair. Yeah, that's exactly what it was. I took the thing that I was really enjoying and that I was really curious about, and I knew that I hadn't even really scratched the surface of it with what I was doing on my own,
Yeah.
even though that was a steep learning curve and I learned a ton. I mean, a ton. I learned a lot of new things because it was such a new world to me at that point. And I knew that I wanted to learn more. And that's kind of what guided that decision to go and do it as a full-time
Right.
job.
And when you applied for that job, did you look for any other positions along, similar things, or was it just
Mhm.
was it that one you applied for it and you got it?
It was the space that I was interested
Sure.
in.
Right.
Actually, it was edtech specifically. So there was two
Okay.
edtech roles that I applied um, for two companies that I absolutely loved. I did the first interview, and I don't even think I bothered to do the second one because it was going really well, and I knew, and once I met the team, it solidified it for me that that's where I wanted to work.
Right.
So I put all of my eggs in one basket. Not that I would advise anyone do
Yeah.
that. But, but at the time, it just wasn't. it wasn't the plan. So the way that it was happening felt like, if this happens, it's going to be fantastic, but if it doesn't, it's not going to be the end of the world. So yeah, I applied for two roles. I ended up only interviewing for that single one, and was fortunate enough to be offered the role.
Well, congratulations. I have to say you were pretty lucky. I do think though that everybody gets a certain amount of luck in the world, and the thing is to be prepared to take advantage of it when you get that luck.
Yeah.
So it sounds like
Yeah.
that's exactly what you did. So that transition from being a founder into what was it, a senior role that you went into, or was it kind of mid-level? What was the point that you were at?
I was lucky at that point. I got to come in quite a junior level.
Okay.
And I say I was lucky because I think with product, once you get into the role, even if you're not a senior product manager, you are still running that product team. So
Yeah.
you do get quite a lot of exposure and a lot of let's call it seniority, a lot of influence,
Yeah.
let's say, straight out the gate. So when I went into my role, I really wanted to be in a space where I could learn and where I could still have a little bit of scope to figure things out and make mistakes without the impact being completely detrimental.
Yeah.
And I think, had I gone into a more senior role to start with, there wouldn't have been the same amount of leeway. That's how I thought about it at the time anyway. And I got to start at a junior level and progress quite quickly once I felt comfortable and understood more of the process of what product management was.
So we're still talking about an early pivot, but I'll come on to the next one in a minute. The next in a series of like four or five. I'm genuinely lost count at this point.
Yeah.
But that must have been quite a shift to go from, running your own company, being a founder, and kind of doing a lot of stuff on your own, to going in at a relatively junior level. Was
Yeah.
it a big company that you went to? You moved to?
Yeah, it was reasonably sized. I would say it was probably like a medium, maybe 300 to 500 people.
Yeah.
But the product team was a lot smaller. Maybe there was, I don't know, 50 to 100 people.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
So how was that? I mean, it must have impacted your finances, I would imagine, as well. Was that something that, you had to adjust to? Uh,
100%. It was yeah, it was definitely an adjustment, but it was one that I prepared for, because I suppose when you're running a startup,
yeah.
even if you're like the founder, it doesn't necessarily mean you've got like millions of pounds in your pocket,
Well,
right? Like
that's not
it's
what I've been told. I've heard that if you do a startup, you're instantly a millionaire. This is
lying to you. No, so it was probably the opposite effect on my finances, in terms of I was going into a full-time role that had probably more stability
right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
the finances when I was just running my startup. Um Fortunately, we had got funding, and I did have some regularity. So the impact on my finances at that point probably wasn't massive. But in later pivots, that's probably when I saw what that transition can do
Yeah.
a bit more clearly. Yeah.
So tell me about the next pivot. Come on.
Yeah. So when I pivoted out of product management and I decided I wanted to go into cybersecurity,
Yeah.
that I would say that was a lot more financially straining.
Okay. Can I just pick up on one thing? When you say
Yeah.
I decided to go into cybersecurity, that sounds like a much more of a conscious decision than
Yeah,
the earlier one.
it was. I think to answer this, I probably have to go back a little bit.
Okay.
I think
I
when
am
I
sitting comfortably.
sitting comfortably,
Yeah.
I think when I was in my product role and I was pivoting into cybersecurity, I probably should have left that role sooner than I did,
Okay.
because I it was like the idea of a pivot came, and I did what most of us do, which is completely ignore it. And you just carry on, even though it might not feel as aligned or with who you are right now, or as aligned with what you want to be doing. So when I got that initial idea and inkling, it was like a whisper that I ignored, because reality, bills, and
Yeah.
all of that good stuff. And then later on, I found myself just feeling quite burnt out by it.
Right.
And at that point, that voice didn't go away. It was like it was now screaming at me. And I then had to take it more seriously and take a step back to then reevaluate, okay, what do you want to do next? What do you want to be doing in 5 years' time? How do you bridge that gap? How do you make an intentional decision now to get you there? So that was kind of the backdrop of that pivot. But I didn't necessarily know that it was going to be into cybersecurity at the time. So when I left my product management role, it was I no longer want to do this, but I don't know what I want to do next.
Right.
And then I took some time to kind of figure things out.
So there was a break in between the in this pivot.
Yeah, there was a break. I definitely didn't go straight into cybersecurity because I knew absolutely nothing about cybersecurity,
Right.
absolutely nothing about the industry. So for me, there had to be that period of upskilling, learning. I ended up doing a cybersecurity boot camp, building a bit of a community,
That's cool.
and that's kind of where my cybersecurity journey started. Um, and in between that time, you then have to figure out, well, how do I keep the lights on?
Yeah.
Because, I had savings, yes, but it's really not a fun activity to watch your savings dwindle month by month. So you
Yes.
you start to think about like, okay, what else can I do to make sure that money's coming in and not just going out? So I ended up doing lots of like part-time gigs. I ended up just tapping into like the gig economy. There's
Right. Right.
so many different things that I discovered that you can do to earn money while you're mid pivot, let's call it.
Yeah, that's really okay. One question I got for you, because you've done this a couple of times, but have you ever been afraid? Have you been like scared? It sounds like at that point there was a bit of, you were much more conscious or
Mhm.
intentional about things. But
Yeah.
when you did it before, or even this time, did you ever get scared?
Looking back on it now, I think I was I think I was too naive to be scared.
Okay.
Yeah, genuinely. I
Right.
don't think I knew enough to be nervous or scared because when I say it out loud to people now, that it's like, you did what?
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
It's really, but at the time, I didn't know enough to be scared. And I think that there's something in that, right? As we grow up, we become more conscious and aware of reality and we, get more responsibility and all of that good stuff.
Yeah,
But
100%.
for me, I now, I now make a more conscious effort to make decisions from that place of n- not necessarily being afraid and just being brave in those decisions, even though I am blessed with the wisdom that I have now,
Yeah.
but still try and find a balance and make decisions from a place of bravery as opposed to fear.
Yeah, well, you can't be brave without being afraid in the first place, I think.
True, very true.
It's
Yeah.
it sounds like the second time when you shifted into cybersecurity, you said that you
Mhm.
had this idea and you should have switched or pivoted earlier. But and that's the reason I asked about the being scared, because I think a reason a lot of people don't pivot, even though when they've got the idea to go into something that they're interested in, is
Mhm.
because they're worried about, change is scary a lot of the time.
Yeah, yeah.
So I was curious whether that was something that, might have prevented you beforehand to switch over.
It's a good question. There were definitely constraints that were really loud in my mind in terms of how am I going to pay my bills?
Right.
How am I going to, and particularly because I didn't know what I wanted to do next, and I knew that that was going to take a lot of figuring out. Um, I think that I had done that thing of becoming really known for doing one thing, becoming really known and
Yeah.
having my identity tied to, you know, running a startup or being a product manager. And stepping away from that, you're now like, oh God, who am I? What do I say when people ask what I'm doing? You're kind of playing out those scenarios in your mind, and you think that time's pausing, and you have all the time in the world to think about those scenarios and play them out. But actually, months and months and months can go by, and you haven't made a decision. You haven't done anything. You've just been in your head playing these scenarios out over and over again, and
Yeah.
how they're going to feel, and how am I going to answer this question. And it can be quite debilitating. I found that in my experience. It took me a long time to get to the other side of that those scenarios and get to the other side of those questions and actually think, I'm probably going to be fine. I'm not going to die. It's going to be okay. I'm still going to be me doing something else. You're not going to, lose that your identity and all of the skills that you've picked up. You take that stuff with you.
Yeah, I tell you one thing that I suffer from my whole, well, I say career, but like my whole life is imposter syndrome. Is that
Mm.
something that you were afflicted by?
I don't think I've come across anyone who isn't a little bit affected by imposter syndrome. And that's even if you're really good at what you do, there's always going to be a voice in the back of your mind that still says, am I the right person to be doing this here right now? And I think that's probably what it's been for me in different parts of my career. I probably get around it by asking the antithesis question, which is, well, why not me? Why, if not me, then who?
Yeah,
You know?
yeah, that's a
Yeah.
fair question to ask. I have to say, when it gets really bad for me, I have genuinely been convinced that they made a mistake hiring me in some roles, because it's just like, I can't do this. It's just this is what they've got, the wrong person.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess you didn't ever feel like that.
No, do you know what? I think that the hiring processes that I've been through, I think for product management and for cybersecurity,
Yeah,
they're quite rigorous. So when I do think that, I then think back to actually, like, it's been a bit of a process to get to this point. Surely
yeah.
they couldn't have made a mistake. I have to be overthinking this because, why not me? What part of this can't I do? Is it genuinely because I can't do it, or is it because I'm overthinking it?
I,
Usually it's because I'm overthinking
yeah, I think you have greater trust in the hiring processes than I do, I have to say.
it.
Okay. So listen, you've done a bunch of pivots. Like, what's something that's carried throughout your different, positions and roles and things that you've been doing? What's
Good question.
what do you think has remained a core part of you?
I tend to be quite attracted to spaces that I think are going to challenge me.
Yeah.
I tend to be quite attracted to spaces that I think I'm going to genuinely be able to add value to because I'm so interested in the subject matter of the space itself.
Yeah.
And I tend to be quite interested in spaces where I have to be a student of that thing first. So
Right.
I have to actually learn it, immerse myself in it, and then be able to add value. Like that process of growing in something and really being fascinated by it is super important for me. That gives me a lot of energy. So I think although the things that I've done on paper appear really, really different,
Yeah.
that red thread for me is following the challenge and following the path that I'm curious about.
That's very cool, I have to say. So huge credit to you, by the way, for taking these jumps and stuff. How are you? So your new position in cybersecurity, is this something
Mhm.
that you're finding you're getting that as well?
Yeah, 100%. Obviously you work in cybersecurity as well, so I don't have to tell you, but it's it's one of the spaces that it's so broad and
Yeah.
there's so many different aspects to it. I I don't know that I'm ever going to run out of things to learn in this space.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that was probably most attractive about this space for me. I was at the Cyber UK conference a few weeks ago and I felt like a kid in a candy store because there was so much to learn
Yeah.
and there was so many people to talk to, and for me, like being around that like gives me so much energy. So yeah, definitely I'm finding that probably more so in this space than previous spaces I've been in.
That's interesting. And okay, so um, I mean, what gave you the inspiration for this podcast? And
Oh, good
yeah,
question.
what was the same questions as before? Was it a moment of clarity, or was it,
Yeah,
how did that work out?
it was a combination of things, right? Having gone through my own pivot, various pivots, the most recent pivot, having gone through that, I spoke to a lot of people that were also pivoting. I think I mentioned to you that I um, completed this boot camp. There were obviously lots of other people doing the boot camp who were transitioning into cybersecurity as well. So as I've built up a community around that pivot, I, I developed a lot of empathy for people in that space of their lives. And I know that for me, I felt quite vulnerable while I was doing that pivot because I had no idea if I would succeed, get to the other side.
Yeah.
And there was so much value for me in talking to people that were doing it, talking to people that had successfully pivoted. So when I got to the other side, when I when I then, made the pivot and got into my cybersecurity role, I still felt that level of empathy. And I know that there are people that are mid pivot, and trying to figure it out. So I wanted to create a platform that allows me to give back to that community in a sense, because I took so much value from that community, whether it was just support, people cheering you on, people telling you how they've navigated certain things. And signposting certain things that you just wouldn't come across on your own. So I wanted to create something that adds value and helps other people navigate that space, because it really is a difficult time, and the uncertainty in it, I think, isn't helped by the fact that it can also feel quite lonely, and you don't always hear the stories of the people who are pivoting. You always hear the success stories of
Yeah.
people who pivoted 10 years ago and they are now millionaires.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's usually the story
You
we hear.
you always hear about the success stories, right? That's what I was
Yeah,
joking about earlier about being
yeah,
all startup founders are millionaires overnight.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
But you don't hear about the struggle to get there very often, unless
yeah.
it's like a TED talk, which is about a successful company usually. Uh,
Usually, exactly,
yeah.
exactly that.
So, did you have much, external support yourself during your various pivots? Were there people that you leaned on? Was there, anything, any kind of resources that you used?
I have, yes. I honestly, I've been quite fortunate in terms of support and community. I have a very supportive fiance. He's probably my number one fan.
Oh.
When I actually decided that I wanted to pursue cybersecurity,
Has he?
it's
Sorry.
no, no, it's fine.
No, no, no. We'll come to that in a second. But has he had experience of pivoting himself?
He has pivoted a couple of times,
Right.
and he actually is also in the cybersecurity space. So he's doing a master's in cybersecurity and data analytics. So when I randomly said that I want to explore cybersecurity, he was over the moon, and he bought me my first kind of cybersecurity for dummies adjacent
Oh,
type.
excellent.
And that was kind of the first thing I read cybersecurity related. So I'm very fortunate. I've got a really really solid support system, which I recognize that not everyone does have that. So again, a community like this, I'm hoping will be really useful and really valuable. Um, in terms of resources, the first thing is that you should definitely look for communities, even if it's not the Pivots and Paydays community, to look for communities and speakers, that are talking about the thing that is relevant to you and what you're trying to pivot into.
I asked about the boot camp that you did. So I had a couple of questions actually. You said before that you weren't sure or didn't know at the time that cybersecurity was the particular area that you were going to go into. So did you try other boot camps, other things around then to sort of figure things out?
I did a lot of reading and probably desk-based research, on a few different potential pathways, and I spoke to people that were in those spaces to try and get a better understanding of what the different roles could potentially be for someone that had my skill set. So that's kind of how I whittled it down, to what I thought would be fascinating and what I thought would be, again, with the similar red thread, something that I thought I would be curious about and get to keep learning in for a long time. So that's ultimately how I landed on cybersecurity.
Were you aware of your values before this? Like, did you think to yourself, okay, so I need to find an area that I'm gonna learn and grow from? So other people might be like, oh, somewhere you could earn a lot of money, or somewhere you can contribute to the world, or cybersecurity does, of course, but like
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know, the economics or climate or something like that, or government regulations or whatever. But did you already have in your mind, okay, that's what I'm looking for? Those are that's the area.
Yes, during that time, of intentionally decide to step away from product and figure out what the next thing was, I knew that it had to be a lot more intentional. So taking that time to actually figure out, what do you care about? What values are important to you? What's going to not only look good on paper but actually feel good day to day.
Yeah.
Like, I had to spend that time really thinking about those things and coming up with answers that felt true to me before then moving forward and trying to figure out where that was going to be able to come to life in the world.
So, I mean, I mean, for myself, that's something that I had a similar kind of moment with, like, I've just gone from one thing to the next, and I
Mm.
need to sit down and figure out what it is that I actually care about in life. So,
Yeah.
um, would you, do you have any like advice for other people who are thinking about this or have something in the back of their mind?
Don't rush it
Right.
is the first thing. um a lot of the time it feels like there's almost a gun to your head to make a decision right now, today, and if it doesn't happen today, it's never going to happen. That's just not true.
Yeah.
um Understand what your own timeline is and figure out what those variables are for you and your specific story. And if there are things that you can do that give you breathing room throughout that process of pivoting, for example, getting part-time jobs, etc.,
Mm.
figuring out other ways to make money, um, then do those things. Because I think that the best thing that you can give yourself while you're in a mid pivot state or thinking about pivoting is the time to make a conscious decision, as opposed to just needing to say yes to the first thing that comes up because you need to pay your bills, because you may just end up in another situation that you need to pivot from again in 6 months. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just quickly, one question I wanted to ask about the boot camp is, did that leave you with a community? Are you still in touch with anybody from your boot camp, or is it something you recommend?
I really had a positive experience of the boot camp that I did. Shout out to the Caps Lock team. That was the name of the boot camp that I completed. My experience of it was really positive. I know that different people have different experience of different boot camps, and obviously do the research, figure out what's going to work for you, what you're looking for
Yeah.
in terms of how long it's going to take or how much it's going to cost, etc. Do that research to make your own decision. But for me, the biggest part of it maybe was the community aspect. So I'm still in touch with some of the people the participants of the boot camp. I'm still in touch with some of the facilitators and the mentors that were part of the boot camp as well. I actually
That's
ran into one of my mentors at Cyber UK, and
oh, awesome.
it was very random, and I we almost didn't recognize each other in 3D.
Was it so? It was an online thing that you did.
Yeah, mine was completely virtual, which was one of the things that was important to me, so that I could have that balance and do part-time work where I needed to, and things like that.
What are there other options that you considered? I imagine that actually getting out your credit card and paying for it in the first place was kind of a pivotal
Totally.
moment for you. A pivotal. um,
See what I did there?
do you see what I did? Um, yeah, it must have been quite a thing to do, right? It's a sort of a step to, it's a very conscious decision to do that.
Mhm.
Um, and were there other things that you considered or that you did as well, apart from the research that you've already mentioned?
Yes, there were other things that I considered, but ultimately for me, my decision process that allowed me to kind of land at the point where I knew that I wanted to do a boot camp was because I'm a person that needs structure.
Yeah.
I will make progress on something, but it may not be as quick as I would like it to be if I don't have that structure.
You procrastinator, are you?
I that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm maybe a procrastinator. Let's just say. But no, I knew that for me, the structure of having to show up every day, having to,
Yeah.
you know, work in a team, having to be accountable to my team as well as the facilitators, having to move through that structure, I knew that would be very, very useful for me. Um, so, and that's not the same thing for everyone.
Yeah.
Some people might be really, really great at just getting super focused and just moving through, because there's a lot of information out there, right?
Yeah.
For me, it was because I was coming into something completely cold and I didn't know anything. There was so much information out there. I had no idea where to even, I had no idea how to kind of thread a path through it. So having a community and facilitators that can kind of help me thread that path and help me then engage with the right things, to give me that holistic understanding that I didn't have.
Yeah.
That was what helped that decision for me. And I don't think I would have progressed as quickly as I did had I not had that structure and accountability, that the bootcamp provided.
So were there any other things that you found really helpful in particular?
For me, it was about talking to people. You
Okay.
know, I you can you can read as much as you want, but for me, hearing from the people that are actually doing the thing,
Yeah.
that's always going to be such a massive, game changer. And it was in my journey, in particular, for sure. I was really fortunate. I was put in contact with, I think the first one of the first people in the industry that I spoke to was actually the head of product at a company called SureCloud. Um, and again, it was a really fortunate situation, and he was really kind to say yes to having that conversation and giving me his time in that way. But we had a really great conversation, and he was able to give me context because he was the head of product and he was working in a cybersecurity company.
Right.
It was a perspective that I could recognize
Yeah.
and understand because I had a product background as well. So having that conversation with him was fantastic. I had a mentor, Georgia, who actually made that connection. So yeah, there's been lots of people, I think, throughout this journey that have been really kind to give up their time and just have a conversation. And I find that the industry is like that. People will have a conversation with you, and that's a really good way to just get an understanding and get really deep knowledge really quickly about what the day to day of it is like, and then things feel a little bit more tangible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to say, I have had the same experience in cybersecurity. There's a lot of really experienced people out there who are more
Mhm.
than happy to give you a moment of their time or a bit of their time. And I think it's because they're genuinely enthusiastic about it and they want to sort of
Yeah.
share that with them. I'm very curious to hear if that's going to be similar in other industries and other people that you're going to have on the podcast. So
Hmm.
yeah, I'm going to be watching carefully. Um, well, so we talked about a lot of things you did right
Yeah.
and the things you found useful and all the kind of successful bits. But
All the fun things.
where did it go? I mean, come on, where did it go wrong? What mistakes did you make? What would you do differently this time, next time round?
Oh, that's where did it go wrong? There was a couple places.
Oh yeah,
The one of them we've kind of already touched on slightly, but it was around when you pivot into something and you're all of a sudden the newbie, you're at the very beginning of something,
yeah,
right? It feels like you're failing before you've even done anything. It feels like you're failing because, for me anyway, in my experience, I was still using the same metric that I was using in my previous role and previous career, where I knew a lot and I was very senior. I was still using that metric
yeah,
and trying to measure the new thing that I was doing with that same metric. So that then made it quite difficult in terms of like staying motivated sometimes, because I just didn't feel like I was doing enough, and it never felt like it felt like I was working really hard, but it didn't feel like I was making enough progress for all of the output that I was giving out. And I had to intentionally stop that and just focus on the inputs, focus on like, what do you need to do today? How do you need to show up today? Ticking things off a to-do list, for
right.
example, and just start using different metrics of success while I was going through that pivot journey. Otherwise, I think motivation would have carried on being quite a problem.
I mean, that's really tough to do, I think.
Yeah,
And I think
yeah,
that's where the support from other people comes in really helpful because just reminding yourself it's okay to fail
yeah.
is important and difficult to do on your own, though. Um,
Well, this is why I couldn't be trusted to just be in the wild on my own, jumping into something new, because it's a real thing, it's being able to stay motivated in the long run.
Yeah.
You really do have to set up a system that's gonna pick you up when on the days when you don't feel like it. If you can set up that system and structure proactively, as opposed to waiting for it to all fall down and then thinking about how to get back up.
So, I mean, actually, I suppose this goes back to your earlier advice, but I was going to ask, what would you, how would you, what would you say to people who don't really have that support structure in place? You know, someone
Mhm.
without the kindest fiance in the world, um, for example.
Yeah, I think it's building it, right? Like it's one of those things. There's no shortcut to it. You don't If you don't have that network, you have to build it.
Right.
And I completely empathize and understand that not everyone immediately has, tons of people they can just call up. But I think start with something as simple as building your community on LinkedIn.
Yeah. True.
Reach out to experts, reach out to people, and just ask if they'd be willing to talk. Like you said, there's a lot of people that are really keen and passionate about what they do, and they're happy to more than happy to share that. There's also a lot of free resources or talks or courses that you can do that will help you to tap into communities that already exist around the thing that you're interested in. So just tapping into that, and when you do tap into that community, try and figure out if there's anything that you can do to add value
Yeah.
as opposed to just take value from it. I think that can be quite a good way to start building out that value chain and start building out that community and that network that you may not have, because that's a very real thing when you're going into something new. Even if you have an existing network, you might not have anyone in that space that you're going into. So it's a very intentional process to build that out.
Yeah, I remember when I was a young programmer and I used to go and find open source projects and just fix bugs for
Yeah,
them. And it just gets you involved in the community, gets you kind of like to, you know, uh, connected with people who are doing similar things and that sort of level. And it's also okay to break things at that point. So
absolutely.
yeah, yeah. And I think that the communities you mentioned, like with the boot camp and these kind of thing, is can provide a support network because it's full of people who want to do the same sort of thing. So
Yeah.
yeah, um, yeah. All right. So any other mistakes? Anything else that went horribly wrong?
Let me think. Things that went horribly wrong.
Nothing in particular. It sounds like.
No, nothing in particular. But like, this wasn't my first rodeo,
Yeah.
fortunately. Um, I don't think anything's gone particularly catastrophically wrong. I tend to be someone that talks to a lot of people and I ask a lot of questions, and I find that usually stops you from making any catastrophic errors. I had a friend who said something to me quite early in my career, and I'm gonna completely butcher the quote now, but he says, "Life's too short to make your own mistakes."
Oh, okay.
And that doesn't mean, don't make mistakes, but it means talk to people as much as you possibly can.
Right.
Anything that you're thinking about doing, someone's probably done it. So go and find that person and go and talk to them and let them tell you where the potholes are so that you cannot hit those potholes, and the mistakes you make will be hopefully smaller and less dramatic, because you've had that person kind of you know tell you what their journey's been. So I've done a lot of that, and I'm very intentional about doing that, which, touch wood, has protected me from the catastrophic mistakes thus far.
Um, so can I just say one thing I think is interesting to note about your journey is that I do think it is a journey that you've
Absolutely.
you know it's called Pivots and Paydays. I will come back to the payday thing in a minute, but the pivots is what we're focusing on. But it does seem like it's something that has been transforming bit by bit over time. There's been key moments, the pivots, where things have actually kind of
Mhm.
changed and transformed your life. But it is interesting to hear how things kind of not quite, well, sort of flow from one part of your life to another.
Mhm.
So yeah, but the paydays aspect of it. I mean, what
Yeah.
would you consider the payday from your different? pivots? I mean, I assume that financially, obviously, or would be a goal, but are there any other kind of aspects of it that you call a payday?
Definitely. And it's funny because yes, the financial aspect of it is, it's a practical thing. It's, we all have bills to pay. It's an important aspect.
Right.
But for me, it's usually not how I make decisions. I tend to use value, in terms of value that I can add, as a better barometer. So that's probably something. If I can increase the amount of value I'm able to add to any given space, that's a win for me, because
Right.
that's then experience that I can take forward and leverage in other things. And I found that every time I've pivoted, um, the amount of value that I've been able to add to the next thing has been exponential because of what I've previously done. Um, so that's probably one thing. Social capital, that's a really big one. There's people that I am in contact with today that it happens so randomly. It can be someone that I met 10 years ago
Yeah.
in, while I was building a business, that I'll be able to collaborate with them somehow with something that I'm doing now. So as I've gone through all of the different spaces that I've pivoted in, a massive payday is increasing that social capital and increasing that network and maintaining those relationships up to today. That's another Yeah, that's another really massive benefit that I've seen on my journey so far.
Yeah.
And
Excellent.
also, just I think just a breadth of experience. When I talk about what my journey has been and what my experience has been so far, I find that I'm able to really relate and pull in different aspects of my experience and utilize them in unexpected ways. Like in a cybersecurity role, you wouldn't think it would be useful that I used to be a children's author, but actually, it is. And there's always
How? Please explain that one.
all of the things. It's just being able to storytell, I think is such a powerful and underrated skill.
Absolutely.
Um, Being able to communicate and get up and really deliver a message or a presentation, and that has a narrative feel and narrative structure. That's not a skill that I learned when I started working in cybersecurity.
Yeah.
I learned that while I was writing children's stories. Things connect in really unexpected ways. So I think that's been an additional payday, let's call it,
Yeah.
um, of all of the pivots.
That's cool. It sounds like knowing your values as well is really useful in that area. Knowing your own values and where
Yeah.
you think you can contribute things. Have you learned anything new about yourself? Have you discovered um, things about yourself that you perhaps weren't aware of before?
Oof. I'm learning to challenge what I think is possible,
Right.
in the sense that since coming into cybersecurity, I think I'm realizing more and more that there really are an endless list of things that you could do,
Yeah.
and that it's just massive,
Yeah.
right? And the breadth of that, I'm learning to lean into it and really be open to what's possible and what's out there and things that you can make happen, and not limit yourself, in terms of not thinking about things that you think might not be for you. Just being open to everything and going for it and just seeing what happens. That's kind of been my motto in this in this journey, and in this most recent pivot. It's just try, just see what happens, um, and just going with that and really leaning into it.
Yeah. I mean, again, I can confirm cybersecurity is a huge area.
Yeah.
It's kind of handy to say, "Oh, I work in cybersecurity," but if
Yeah.
anybody asks you any more questions about that, yeah. Well, hang on. Let me just explain this bit and that bit and how it connects, and that's the bit I've been doing. Yeah,
Absolutely.
it's that.
Absolutely.
It is never ending. Um, all right. So, specifically for people who are listening,
Mhm.
um, and they were thinking about, uh, pivoting their life in some way. How, other than what you said already, how would you get started? I mean, what's the first step you would take?
For me, it's going to sound really cliche, but I'd go old school. I'd go old school, pen and paper, and
Okay.
just map out, just map out, understand why you want to pivot first and foremost, because you might not know necessarily what you want to pivot into yet. But if you understand why you want to pivot, I think that gives you a better springboard in terms of then exploring what you would want to do next.
What do you want your payday to be?
Well, yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's a big question. What do you want your payday to be? We joke about it, but it matters, right? Like what does value look like for you? What do you want to get out of what this next move is going to be? So that's probably the first thing. Just try and map that out and really understand that, and make sure it makes sense to you, for you. After that, I would then try and see if you can speak to anyone. If you have an idea of what you want to go into next,
Yeah.
or someone that has done a similar pivot or been on a similar journey, can you have a conversation with them? Because just having that conversation might bring things up that you might not have thought of, might signpost things that you might not have thought of, that would shortcut some of the thinking process for you. So talk to people and try and clarify what you want that journey to be, and then just do the thing.
Yeah.
Whatever the thing is, do the thing. Don't get caught up in, if you're a planner like me, you will understand it is really, really easy for planning to become a form of procrastination. So don't do so much planning that you end up just not doing the thing. Figure out what the smallest thing is that you can do, and then just do it. And after you do that, the next step will probably become clearer as you go.
Yeah, I think something like the boot camp is a really good example of doing the thing, because it's a concrete. You have to go and pay for it, and
Yep.
you want to get your money's worth, and it has a beginning and an end. And like you said about the structure, I think is useful
Uh-huh.
to a lot of people. I'm the same. I can't empathize with people who are chaotic at all. So
I
yeah.
don't know how they do it. It must be, gosh, it must be quite a life. I couldn't be me. Couldn't be me.
Well, I'm sure that there are people out there listening who are work in different ways, but
Yeah,
maybe
yeah,
we'll hear from some of them in future episodes.
absolutely,
But yeah,
absolutely.
I think for now I'm done. That was really fascinating. Thank you so much, Howard, for allowing me to come on and question you. Slightly terrified about my upcoming interview, but
Oh, it's gonna be good. No, thank you. Thank you for having the idea to like put me in the hot seat and getting me to tell my story. Um, I'm not a person who loves interviews, but I hope that was useful
I
and
think
helpful to
it's
someone.
absolutely fascinating. You've got so much good advice. The story, just hearing the story and the different times you've changed and how they differed and how they were the same, I think is going to be really useful to people who are considering some kind of change like this in their life as well.
Yeah,
So yeah,
amazing.
cool.
Well, thank you so much, Peter, and we will see you back here very soon.
Yes, we will. Cheers, Howard.